Hello to all of you, welcome to my channel. We're going to examine yet another horrifying situation with you today. Even the most seasoned detectives were taken aback by the cold-blooded murder that occurred in the tranquil Texas town of Fort Worth in the spring of 2016. Elizabeth Paula Arellano, a young mother of many children and paramedic, was the victim of the crime. You'll be horrified to hear who carried out her execution. Because of the peculiar circumstances surrounding the tragedy, the authorities first even proposed the possibility that Elizabeth might have died of her own volition. Nevertheless, the evidence of others who happened to be unintentional witnesses to the horrific event contradicted this idea. The investigation had to work very hard to make sense of everything and bring the offender to justice. However, many felt that the punishment was too light and unjust, considering the severity of the act he committed. On August 16, 1987, Elizabeth Paula Arellano was born in Fort Worth, Texas, the American city where she would spend the remainder of her brief life. She was practically inseparable from her two sisters, Alessandra and Giovanna, during her upbringing. When Elizabeth was very little, her birth father abandoned the family. He made no effort to get in touch with his daughter and expressed no interest in her future. Juanita, her mother, soon remarried to Fidel, a guy who took her kids under his wing and raised them as his own. Elizabeth had a close bond with her stepfather, who was always there to encourage and assist her. The girl dreamed of becoming a doctor and studied hard in school. She met Rudolph Arellano in high school, and the two quickly became romantically involved. Elizabeth's parents were a little embarrassed by the fact that the young guy was nearly 8 years her senior. However, they did not become involved in their romance since they thought the selected daughter was a serious and trustworthy man. Elizabeth legally wed her sweetheart at the age of 16, having just finished her education. The couple had 4 kids in total, 3 sons and a daughter, one after the other. But Elizabeth did not plan to become a housewife, even though multiple heirs appeared. Elizabeth completed her medical school degree, secured employment as a paramedic, and planned to pursue more schooling to fulfill her childhood dream of becoming a doctor. The young lady was raised in Christian customs and was gentle and devout. She instilled love and compassion for their neighbors in her children by taking them to church on a daily basis. Her friends and family described her as a very helpful and responsive individual. Although their marriage to Rudolph appeared solid and content on the outside, after 13 years of cohabitation, it started to physically fall apart. Rudolph used to be envious of his young wife and tried to dominate her in every way, but eventually his actions became intolerable. Following another jealousy scene set up by her husband in the spring of 2016, Elizabeth took the kids and moved in with her parents. Rudolph tried to make things right with his wife, but the girl had had enough of his outbursts. She also mustered the resolve to formally file for divorce, since she did not want the kids to have to listen to the parents' scandals, which seemed to be happening virtually every day. Elizabeth abducted the kids and filed for divorce a few days later, but she vanished without explanation. She chose to go out with co-workers to a local club after work in order to detach herself from her divorce and family issues, but friends and family said she was in a good mood. Thus, the 28-year-old young mother went to a fun location with her pals on Friday evening, April 15, 2016. She went to the club, danced, and enjoyed herself, but she refrained from drinking because she intended to drive herself home. On April 16th, Elizabeth came home well after midnight. After parking the car, she made a call to her friend from the club, with whom she had spent a vacation, to let her know that she had arrived home safely. After that, Elizabeth hung up the phone but didn't go inside. When Juanita, her mother, discovered her daughter was missing the following morning, she became quite concerned. She was aware that Elizabeth intended to go out with friends that evening, but her daughter ought to have come back long ago. Elizabeth had obviously returned from the club because her car was parked outside the home, and she couldn't get up and leave. It turned out that the automobile was not locked when Juanita got closer. Her daughter's mobile phone and handbag were inside, on the seat, and the key was still stuck in the ignition. Her personal possessions couldn't have been left in the open car like that, of course, which indicated that a horrible incident had occurred. The female called right away, the missing persons report to the police. The police thought they were on the right track, so to speak, to solve the case. Furthermore, Elizabeth's life was still hoped for because the car showed no traces of blood or struggle. However, it was not that easy. The first things that needed to be done were to meticulously recreate the events of that evening and night, map out Elizabeth's whole path, and locate and speak with every potential witness. Interviews were conducted first with the young woman's friends and co-workers, with whom she had spent the night before going missing. They provided the precise moment that Elizabeth left for home, and afterward, Elizabeth contacted to confirm that she had arrived home without incident. The missing person's cell phone also included multiple calls and texts from her ex-husband, Rudolph Arellano, who had made repeated attempts to get in touch with her that evening. Elizabeth, though, never responded to him. To discover out where Rudolph was and what he was doing the night before, police officers went to his home. The man claimed that only the previous evening he had spoken with his ex-wife, who had assured him that she would bring the kids over for the weekend. However, she stopped returning calls after that, leading him to believe she had changed her mind. Arellano had a dubious alibi, if one existed. He claims that after spending the evening at a nearby pub with a buddy, he went back to his house at midnight and went to bed. Rudolph was there, according to his friend and a few other people who had been hanging out at the same place on Friday, but nobody was certain of where he went after that. The man claimed to have returned home, but as he was living alone now, no one could vouch for him. Therefore, Mr. Arellano would not be removed from the suspect list by the police. Besides, he didn't appear agitated or concerned. Though they had been married for a long time, it was obvious that he and Elizabeth were divorcing. It was odd that her leaving had not affected him in the slightest, considering she was the mother of his children. A fisherman reported an unusual incident he had seen to the emergency services on the night of the young mother's disappearance. The man claimed that around 4:30 in the morning, he saw a car drive onto the bridge, stop, and then the driver pulled out something large that appeared to be a person and threw it into the water. He was sitting alone with a fishing rod on the bridge, which is a part of an interstate highway. He also got the impression that this individual was wearing a large, visibly weighty object. The fisherman could not see details or the make and number of the car because he was far away and it was still dark. The individual was also unable to hear anything because of the high wind on the bridge. Another witness was soon discovered, strolling beside the bridge at night with his dog. He was blind to what was going on the bridge itself, but he heard a terrible cry. Then he heard a splash, saw something big fly down from the bridge, and then all was silence. The authorities made the decision to investigate the pond's bottom, close to the bridge based on the evidence of witnesses. A few hours later, divers discovered a body with a large chunk of concrete roped around its neck. Elizabeth Arellano, who had gone missing, was identified as the drowning woman. Because of the tide weight that prevented the body from floating, it is likely that the body would not have been recovered at all if it weren't for the witnesses of a fisherman and a bystander. Then, another account surfaced claiming that the young lady made the decision to end her life on her own volition due to family issues. However, this supposition was unsupportable since it conflicted with the evidence of a witness who observed someone throw the woman into the ocean, and with the statements of family members who reassured that Elizabeth had big plans for the future and would never harm her parents or children. When a piece of concrete was hurled from the bridge while Elizabeth was still alive, it was fastened around her neck. This was confirmed by the testimony of a man who heard the young woman's frantic scream as she flew down the bridge, as well as by the forensic medical results, which demonstrated that she had suffocated. But who could have killed a mother of many children so ruthlessly, and why? Since none of Elizabeth's items were taken, robbery was ruled out. There have been theories that the murderer may have seen Elizabeth at the club and followed her home, or that someone may have watched over Elizabeth while she was there and waited for her to come back. The deceased's ex-husband persisted in saying he had nothing to do with the murder and was only sleeping at his house that night. Still, the detectives were not in a rush to remove Rudolph from the list of suspects since his actions begged more and more questions and he had no alibi. The man performed at the funeral. He sobbed at his ex-wife's coffin, expressing his desire to either die beside her or be in her place. Elizabeth, his sister, claimed that she even thought his statements were sincere. Furthermore, Rudolph actively participated in the establishment of a non-profit organization to gather money for his wife's wedding. However, when the man was asked to testify again after the funeral, he immediately seemed and acted very differently, as though nothing negative had happened in his life. Following a thorough analysis of all the CCTV footage from Elizabeth's final trip, it was discovered that, at approximately 3 in the morning, a car identical in make and color to Rudolph's had left her parents' home. The neighbor also remembered seeing the vehicle parked close to the deceased's residence on the road. Furthermore, It was proven that the vehicle had thereafter proceeded in the direction of the bridge where the woman had been flung. Numerous doubts were generated by this situation, and those questions increased when Rudolph's cell phone data from the night of the crime was requested by the inquiry. It transpired that the man had made many calls that evening. First, in the vicinity of Elizabeth's workplace. Second, in the vicinity of his in-laws' residences. In an attempt to find out when his ex-wife would return, he also sent her multiple messages, but he never received a response. He had apparently been following her, and at some point he made the decision to go to Elizabeth's parents' house and wait for her to return. Rudolph was apprehended by the police as the main suspect and sent to the station for additional interrogation after they had gathered sufficient evidence. The oldest son of Elizabeth and Rudolph was one of the main witnesses in the case. The youngster claimed he recalled the rope clearly from playing with it when it was given to him after it had been taken from his mother's neck. The boy had seen the rope in his father's backyard earlier. In addition, the boy identified a fragment of concrete that had been in their garden not long after the fence was changed. Additionally, tiny pieces of same concrete were discovered in Rudolph's car's trunk. According to the inquiry, the man kidnapped his ex-wife before she could enter the house after waiting for her at her parents' house. He pushed her into the trunk of his car, where he had already laid out concrete and rope. Then, hoping to escape detection, he drove to the bridge for the massacre. After his ex-wife's body was found in the lake, Rudolph Arellano was arrested 10 days later. Rudolph insisted that he was at home that night and denied any involvement in the crime, even in the face of overwhelming evidence and witness testimony that proved his guilt. Rudolph was about to get the death penalty, which was the ultimate punishment for his heinous acts. Then, in an attempt to lessen his sentence, he made the decision, as advised by his attorney, to confess to all of the crimes and assist with the investigation. Arellano didn't enter a guilty plea or reveal the details of his abduction and murder of his ex-wife and the mother of their 4 children until January 2019. While hearing his story in the courtroom, Juanita passed out, and Alessandra and Giovanna referred to their sister's killer as a monster. Despite acknowledging his responsibility, Rudolph did not experience any regret or guilt. He apologized, gave no explanation for his horrible conduct, and talked coldly and apathetically about his murder. The murderer was given a life sentence without the possibility of release by the court. Elizabeth's family members said they forgive Rudolph because they don't want their hearts to burst with resentment, even if they thought the punishment was rather light. The children of the deceased widow are now in the care of her parents and sisters. I appreciate you everyone watching. There are many surprising stories planned, so be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you all once more.